Ron Howard, a man forged in the unforgiving fires of Hollywood's brightest stages, stands not as a symbol of easy triumph, but as a monument to survival itself. Behind the gentle smile that graced America's living rooms for decades lies a paradox so profound it fractures the very image we hold dear. He is the boy who grew up under studio lights before he could spell his own name, the actor who became Opie Taylor and Richie Cunningham, beloved sons claimed by millions of families who never asked what he sacrificed to belong to them. He is the visionary director who reshaped modern cinema with Apollo 13 and A Beautiful Mind, films that earned billions and carved his name into the foundations of American storytelling. But behind that legacy lies a story not glamorous, but devastating, a childhood stolen by cameras, a youth crushed beneath the weight of other people's nostalgia, decades of storms that Hollywood's golden glow could never truly mask. Before we begin, if Ron Howard's work ever gave you comfort, laughter, or a moment of genuine wonder, leave a like as tribute to the boy who lost his innocence so America could keep theirs. Behind the thunder of global fame lies a cruel truth. Ron Howard's first stage was not lit with dazzling spotlights, but with the cold machinery of an industry that consumes children whole. Ronald William Howard entered the world on March 1st, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma. Born to Rance and Jean Howard, working actors who scraped by on uncertain paychecks and packed hope more often than belongings. Before Ron could form full sentences, the glow of cameras had already begun to overwrite the simple joys that should have marked his early days. By 18 months old, his world was no longer measured in lullabies or laughter, but in call sheets and camera angles. His first steps didn't fall on soft earth or warm grass. They landed on the cold planks of a film set under lights too bright for a child to understand. When the Howards moved from Oklahoma to California in the mid-1950s, chasing the rising tide of television, their lives tightened around studio gates and unpredictable casting calls. Ron would later admit, "I grew up around grown-up problems long before I understood them, and it was the plain, painful truth." His classrooms were cramped trailers tucked behind sound stages where the murmur of arithmetic was drowned by the clatter of equipment being dragged into place. Crew members smoked so heavily that a haze lingered like a low-hanging cloud, stinging the eyes of the small red-haired boy trying to focus on worksheets. Men cursed over missed cues, argued about lighting, or laughed too loudly over things he didn't understand. Some afternoons, the prop masters swayed with drink before the clock even struck noon. Even the studio bathroom, its walls scribbled with crude, bewildering drawings, was something his father had to explain awkwardly far too early. These were the lessons life forced upon him, lessons no 6-year-old should have to absorb. By 1960, when he stepped into the shoes of Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show, America embraced him as its cherished on-screen son. But behind that smile lived a quiet ache. California law required him to study 3 hours a day, yet the children around him were colleagues, not companions. There were no recess bells, no baseball games waiting after school, no friends calling his name across a sunny yard. It was a golden cage, he said later. Safe, yes, but sealed shut. And when filming ended and the applause faded, the loneliness didn't. It trailed him home like a shadow he couldn't outrun. Beyond the studio walls, the world wounded him in different ways. Kids twisted Opie into dopey, mopey, soapy, rhymes that pierced sharper than any scripted criticism. He avoided the school bathroom after too many harsh jokes. And one day, terrified and unable to bear another taunt, he lost control and wet his pants in public. The humiliation carved itself deep into his memory. At 8, filming The Music Man, he panicked during a dance routine, whispering to Shirley Jones, "I can't do it," trembling at the thought of disappointing adults whose approval felt essential to breathing. From neglect, he carved resolve. From rejection, he learned defiance. Armed with nothing but stubborn will and bruises of rejection, Ron Howard stepped into adolescence, carrying a burden most adults never bear. The fame that defined his childhood became the cage that trapped his youth. By 6, America already knew his face. By 13, the image of Opie Taylor clung to him with a force that felt less like affection and more like a lock he didn't know how to open. Fame gave him comfort on paper, steady work, a paycheck, a sense of security, but it quietly stripped away the life he might have grown into. "I didn't know who I was without that character," he would admit years later. And the honesty of that reflection reveals just how deeply the role had rooted itself into his identity. What the world adored, he silently feared he could never outgrow. While boys his age experimented with new haircuts and clumsy first romances, Ron faced an industry that insisted he stay frozen in time. Casting directors greeted him warmly, only to dismiss him with careful politeness. Too recognizable, too Opie, not quite right for anything else. A producer delivered the line that followed him like a cold echo. "America won't let go of that boy." It was meant as a compliment, but Ron felt the weight of it settling over him like a shrinking costume, one that pinched tighter the more he struggled to grow. At 13, he found a glimmer of hope in the Monroes, a chance to break free from the innocence of Mayberry and step into a different kind of story. But when the show was canceled after just 26 episodes, the blow cut deeper than the abrupt ending of a job. Ron blamed himself, his acting, his tone, even the way he carried himself on set. "I thought I had failed everyone," he later said, remembering how the silence that followed felt like winter settling inside him. It wasn't just a cancellation. It felt like a verdict. Hollywood, he feared, had decided he'd peaked before he even understood what a peak was. Then came 1974 and Happy Days, an opportunity that should have freed him from doubt, yet ended up reopening wounds he didn't know still bled. As Richie Cunningham, he worked with devotion, but fame shifted sharply toward the Fonz's orbit, leaving Ron to endure questions no young actor should face. But even as the cameras claimed him again, something inside Ron was changing. At the University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts, he discovered that the language of film spoke to him differently from behind the lens. He began to see stories as structures, emotions, as architecture, and in that revelation, Ron Howard found his first true breath of freedom. The boy America wouldn't let go of was beginning to imagine a future where he controlled the narrative instead of being consumed by it. By 1982, Ron Howard was no longer the red-haired boy trapped in sitcom amber. He was a director. And with Night Shift, his directorial debut, he announced himself not with thunder, but with quiet competence that would become his signature. The film earned modest returns, but it proved Ron could command a set, shape performances, and translate vision into reality. Then came 1984 and Splash, the romantic comedy that shattered expectations and earned over $69 million. Suddenly, Ron Howard wasn't just credible, he was bankable. By 1985, he co-founded Imagine Entertainment with producer Brian Grazer, building an empire that would produce some of the most emotionally resonant films in modern cinema. The world saw success blooming like spring flowers after a long winter. But behind the cameras, the truth was different. Ron worked relentlessly, obsessively, driving himself with a hunger born not from greed, but from fear. Fear that Hollywood would remember him only as Opie. Fear that one misstep would erase everything he'd built. His days stretched into 16-hour marathons. Mornings began before sunrise on location scouts. Afternoons bled into endless meetings with studio executives who questioned his instincts. Evenings disappeared into editing bays, where he dissected footage frame by frame, searching for perfection that always seemed one cut away. By the time he arrived home, His children were asleep. His wife Cheryl waited in dim light, patient but weary. And Ron, hollowed by exhaustion, would collapse into silence too heavy for words. The pattern continued through Cocoon in 1985, Willow in 1988, Backdraft in 1991. Each film demanded more. Each success raised expectations higher. Then came 1995 and Apollo 13, the film that elevated Ron Howard from accomplished director to master storyteller. The movie earned over $350 million worldwide, received 9 Academy Award nominations, and reminded audiences that Ron understood the human heart as deeply as he understood the craft. But the accolades couldn't protect him from what was unraveling at home. His mother, Jean's health was failing, her heart weakening under the weight of time. His brother Clint, the younger sibling who once looked up to Ron with bright eyes, was drowning in addictions that threatened to pull him under completely. And Ron, standing at the peak of professional achievement, felt the isolation that success demands. Power, as Ron Howard discovered, carries a heartbreaking price. The more he succeeded, the more life reminded him that no amount of box office revenue could shield him from human suffering. When Ron Howard first received the news that his mother's heart was failing, the cameras captured nothing. They could not capture the storm that tore through him in the privacy of hospital corridors. Jean Howard, the woman who brought him into this world, who stood beside him on sets when he was too young to understand what it meant to perform, who whispered encouragement when the industry felt too heavy for a child's shoulders, was slipping away. Ron sat beside her bed, holding her hand. Feeling the fragility of bones that once carried such strength, he thought of all the moments he'd missed, all the phone calls cut short by production schedules, all the holidays spent on location, while his mother set a table and pretended not to notice the empty chair. "I was building a career," he would say later, his voice cracking with regret. "But I was also building distance from the people who loved me before the world knew my name." When Jean passed in 2000, the grief carved itself into Ron in ways fame could never touch. He stood at her funeral, surrounded by industry colleagues offering condolences that felt hollow against the magnitude of his loss. And in that moment, Ron understood a cruel truth. Success had given him everything except time. Time to sit with his mother without scripts, demanding attention. Time to ask her stories about her own dreams before Hollywood consumed them both. Time to simply be her son instead of Ron Howard, the director. But fate had other plans. Just as Ron was learning to navigate life without his mother's steady presence, his brother Clint's struggles intensified. Clint Howard, a talented character actor in his own right, had spent years battling demons that whispered louder than any applause. Addiction wrapped around him like chains, pulling him deeper into darkness Ron couldn't fully reach. There were interventions, tearful confrontations, moments when Ron held his brother and felt him trembling, caught between the person he wanted to be and the person addiction demanded. "I thought I could save him," Ron admitted. "I thought if I just worked harder, earned more, built a safety net strong enough, I could pull him back. But addiction doesn't care about your net worth or your Academy Awards. It only cares about consuming what's left." The night Ron received the call that Clint had collapsed, something inside him shattered. He raced to the hospital, his mind flooded with memories. Clint as a boy, laughing on set. Clint in his 20s, struggling to find his footing. Clint at family dinners, wearing a smile that never quite reached his eyes. And Ron, the big brother who conquered Hollywood, felt utterly powerless. Clint survived that night. Slowly, through treatment and the stubborn refusal to surrender, he found his way back. But the scars remained. For both of them. Ron carried the weight of almost losing his brother, and that weight never fully lifted. Then came early 2023. Ron was standing in a studio hallway reviewing notes when his phone buzzed. The call delivered news that hit like a sudden frost. Cindy Williams was gone. The girl who once lit up the set of American Graffiti with laughter and warmth. The friend who made Ron feel less alone during the chaos of early fame. A sudden, brief illness. No warning, no final conversation, one swift turn of fate, and her life slipped away. For a moment, he couldn't speak. The lights felt too bright, the air too thin. All he could hear was her laugh, bright, ringing, alive. The same laugh that once echoed through neon nights 5 decades earlier. He hadn't called in months. He never told her what her presence meant when he was still finding his footing. He never told her how her warmth steadied him in the whirlwind of early fame. Some grief stings, some grief carves. Cindy's loss carved straight through him, leaving an ache shaped exactly like the girl who once made the world feel a little less overwhelming. In 2026, Ron Howard stands not as the boy America remembers, but as a man who survived every storm Hollywood and life could summon. At 71, worn by time yet still standing, his net worth has settled at nearly $200 million. The number is impressive, but the journey behind it is what astonishes. His wealth is woven from Imagine Entertainment holdings, directing royalties, decades of syndication revenue, long-term investments, and a real estate portfolio patiently built over half a century. His 32-acre Greenwich estate remains the jewel, a 17,000-square-foot residence wrapped in old-growth trees, a private lake that mirrors the sky, a screening room carved like an intimate theater. In Los Angeles, he keeps a modern minimalist home, warm light, clean lines, walls lined with memories of sets that shaped him. These are not trophies, they are chapters. Testimony to a man who rose from cramped apartments and overdue bills to the calm dignity of a life, earned carefully, humbly, step by step. Ron and Cheryl, after more than 50 years of marriage, now move through their days with the steadiness of people who survived everything meant to break them. Their 4 children remain the brightest parts of their home. Bryce Dallas Howard, born in 1981, is now both a celebrated actress and an ambitious director. The twins, Paige and Jocelyn, born in 1985, grew into women of integrity, and Reed, the youngest, born in 1987, remains the grounding soul of the family. Visits are frequent, long dinners, where stories flow easily, laughter rises from room to room, and Ron finds himself quietly watching, taking mental snapshots of the life he nearly missed during the years Hollywood consumed him. Despite the success, he has given away millions, scholarships for art students, funds for children's hospitals, support for veterans programs, grants for young filmmakers from underprivileged communities. He never publicizes it. He gives the way his parents taught him, kindly, quietly, never expecting applause. His days are now filled with simple rituals once stolen by fame. Morning walks with Cheryl, hours spent reading scripts without deadlines pressing on his chest. Weekends surrounded by grandchildren climbing into his lap with curiosity that softens him every time. Losing his mother Jean to heart complications and his father Rance to a long decline from heart failure taught him to measure life in moments, not milestones. Pulling Clint back from the edge taught him that survival is a quiet miracle, and losing Cindy Williams in 2023 reminded him that memories are not just echoes of the past, they are anchors. Ron Howard's life today is gentler, calmer, but richer than any moment of fame. He understands now that the greatest luxury is not property or acclaim. It is peace. The peace of knowing you lived honestly, loved deeply, gave generously, and kept standing every time the world tried to fold you. And so, as Ron Howard steps through this season of his life, steadier, softer, wiser, his story leaves us with more than admiration. It leaves us with clarity. That greatness is built not from perfection, but from persistence. That wealth is hollow without warmth. That success means little unless it's shared at a dinner table filled with familiar faces. and that every storm we survive becomes a lantern for someone still searching their way through the dark.